Hejnice, Heindorf in German, which is a village in a grove, is situated in the green valley of the s.r.o. river and surrounded by the beech forests of the Evropské mountains. It is a recognized UNESCO Natural Heritage Site. It has a centuries-old pilgrimage tradition which began with the legend of a miracle of healing. The legend. According to the legend, the pilgrimage center was founded in 1211, when the first wooden chapel was built on the site of the present church. The legend tells the story of a sieve maker from nearby Lužec, who lived there with his sick wife and child. He would walk through the forests of Hejnice on his way to work, and is said to have once rested on a rocky promontory above the s.r.o. river under a lime tree. The legend has it that he fell asleep under the tree and had a dream in which he saw a lime tree bathed in light, with angels sitting on its branches, when one of them said to him, "You are in a miraculous place, which the Father loves. Go home and return with an image of the Mother of God, so that everyone who passes by in the future may stop and share in His grace. Your wife and child will be healed for you as a reward." The sieve maker decided to obey God's word and set out on a journey to nearby Zittau to sell his products and to buy a statuette of the Virgin Mary from a carver for the money he had earned. He bought the statuette, returned to Hejnice, and placed it in a hollow lime tree. The sieve maker's wife and child were miraculously healed, the news of which spread all over the area. People started visiting the lime tree, with the smiling Madonna Mater Formosa pleading for her help. This blessed pilgrimage location was also revered by the lords of Friedland. The history. In 1278, Rulko of Bilberstein bought the Friedland manor from King Ottokar II of Bohemia, Přemysl Ottokar II. In 1346, the Bishop of Meissen appointed a parish priest from nearby Raspenova to teach at the pilgrimage centre in Hejnice. As more and more pilgrims arrived, the small church was gradually expanded. The church was consecrated in honour of the Virgin Mary by Bishop John of Saalhausen on the 2nd of September 1498. After the death of Christopher Bilberstein, the estate passed to Emperor Ferdinand I, who sold it in 1558 to the Protestant Redern family for 40,000 florins. When the new owners took over the estate, they immediately took advantage of the then prevailing law, cuius regio, eius religio, whose land, his religion, to change all the churches into Protestant ones. The Marian Pilgrimage Church in Hejnice was the only one to remain Catholic, but it was closed. The pilgrims did not cease coming to Hejnice, though. They prayed outside the closed gates of the church. Even letters of supplication sent by prominent dignitaries had no effect. Even the wife of the Friedland lord, Lady Catherine, Katarina, would not give in to their pleas to open the church. She took the entire treasure of the Church of Hejnice, including the gracious Madonna, to her chateau in Liberec. This is documented in a well-preserved old manuscript of 1609. However, the chateau was burnt down on the 2nd of May 1615. Miraculously, the statuette of the gracious Madonna of Hejnice was not destroyed. It is said to have been God's punishment for Catherine's arrogance. She is said to have taken the statuette of the Mother of God back to the Church of Hejnice the same day. The Church of Hejnice did not reclaim its original rights until the Battle of the White Mountain of 1620. In 1622, the Friedland estate was bought by Albrecht of Wallenstein, who decided to renovate and reopen the church. After the murder of Wallenstein in 1634, Friedland was taken over by the Gallas family in 1636. The fame of the pilgrimage church reached its peak during their reign, and the pilgrimage festivities were widely attended. It was not uncommon for 6,000 or 7,000 pilgrims to gather for these festivities. This is why Count Franz Ferdinand Gallas and his wife Johanna Emerenciana decided to add roofing along the perimeter of the church to provide shelter for the pilgrims. It serves as the way of the cross to this day. As the number of believers steadily increased, the Count and his wife invited Franciscan friars to Hejnice to provide the pilgrims with spiritual and material support. The Count had a monastery built for them near the church. In the founding charter of the 20th of February 1691, Count Franz Ferdinand Gallas committed himself to building a house for at least 12 friars, 8 priests, and 4 laymen. In return, the Franciscans were to celebrate Mass for the deceased patrons of the Gallas family once a week. The foundation stone was laid by Father Amandus Hermann on April the 27th, 1692. The construction of the monastery was completed in 1696. The projects and plans to build the pilgrimage centre were not disrupted even by the sudden death of Count Franz Ferdinand on the 4th of January 1697. He was then the first family member to be laid to rest in the family tomb in the crypt. His wife continued to expand the site for the believers, whose numbers continued growing. At the beginning of the 18th century, it was decided to build a new church, which was erected on the site of the original one between 1722 and 1729, according to the plans of Thomas Heffennecker. The new church was consecrated with pomp and ceremony on the 1st of July 1725, on the eve of the Feast of the Visitation. Hard times of the church and monastery in Hejnice. The church and the monastery were renovated several times. The first time was after the Great Fire of the 1st of May 1761, when the monastery library was burnt down and the fire melted the bells. The Franciscans saved the statuette of the Gracious Virgin Mary. During the Josephine reforms, all the liturgical vessels made of silver were removed from the church and taken to Vienna. By decree of the 21st of May 1784, all votive offerings had to be removed from the walls of the chapel devoted to the Gracious Virgin Mary, and the church interior became austere and fell into disrepair. It was not until 1900 that the quadran of the monastery, Dominican Denmark, commenced extensive renovations for Count Franz Gallas. The renovation, costing 200,000 Austrian crowns, was fully paid for by its patron, Count Gallas. The ceiling of the church was painted between 1904 and 1906 by Andreas Groll and his disciple Dominik Brosik. In May 1914, 3 new bells were installed in the belfry, but these were soon taken down and used to make weapons for World War I. New bells were hung in 1924, but they suffered the same fate during World War II. After the war, German inhabitants, including the Franciscans, were expelled from Hejnice and the whole of the Sudetenland. In 1950, the monastery and the church were occupied by the state security, and the Franciscans were arrested. The monastery was turned into an internment camp for monks and nuns. About 500 of them passed through this place during the 5 years of persecution. Later, the monastery was used as a charity home for nuns, as a school canteen, a daycare centre, and a school garden. After the opening of a new school building in 1977, the monastery was abandoned, and it was then managed by the Museum of North Bohemia. In the mid-1980s, they built a road that ran through the monastery garden. The Baroque wall was torn down, and the ancient trees and shrubs disappeared too. From the 1950s to the 1980s, the monastery and the church fell into disrepair. Change came only with the Velvet Revolution in 1989. Father Dr. Miloš Raban, 1948 to 2011, returned to Czechia in 1989, and as pastor and later director of the International Center for Spiritual Renewal, took up residence in the renovated monastery in 2000 and upgraded and restored the pilgrimage complex with substantial financial aid from the Sudeten Germans, the European Union, and Dalibor Dědek, a local entrepreneur. The church and monastery have been open to the public all year round since the 1990s. The church is available for private contemplation, tours, masses, and pilgrimages. The monastery of Hejnice serves as an educational and conference centre and a shelter for pilgrims. Travellers can find accommodation here or visit the exhibition gallery and restaurant.